it's going to be the best. Right? That's what I thought they were awesome. Can I share this with you too, sir? I know you have a Mylar sticker.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Got to go. Good to meet you guys.
Welcome everyone. We are at time, so we'll invite the school board candidates to come up and our moderators, and we'll get started. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight on a hot summer night. We're going to get started if you want to take your seat.
I'm just doing the time, so let me get you another chair.
All right, well, thank you. My name is Haley Kaplan, and I'm the president of the Washington County Republican Women. We've been trying to host as many races as we can so that you guys can get educated on the candidates. So thank you for coming, and please take what you learned to your neighbors, and we appreciate you coming and getting involved for this primary election. We are going to, let's have a couple announcements before I forget, and then we're going to have a prayer and pledge. Yeah, I was just going to mention, so we meet monthly. We have luncheons. We bring on a lot of candidates or speakers. So if you'd like to join us, we're always the first Thursday of the month. If you go to WashingtonCountyRepublicanWomen.com, we'd love to have you anytime. Men are invited as well, so don't be shy. You've probably noticed the note cards on your chairs. That's if you have a question for the candidate. So please write your question, and got Alexis or running around or wave it at us. We'll come get it for you. And we can get you another card if you just want for school board, and then we'll do Attorney General. So we do have our luncheon next week. I wanted to mention is going to be our county commissioners. That's next Thursday at 11:30 at the Adams here at the Abbey Inn. So we appreciate the commissioners coming and updating us on our county. You can ask them questions. And yes, thank you for our elected officials that are here. We have Commissioner Snow, we have Councilman Ivy, we have Councilwoman Larson. Let's see, who have I missed? Anyone else sneaking on me? Let me know. So we have Chairwoman Lisa of the county party. I think, hopefully I missed anyone. Okay. And then also it has been asked if you're wondering about other debates that are going to happen. The debate commission is doing some online debates, so you can watch those. It's June. The dates are June 10th through the 12th. So go to their site and see which race. But those will be broadcasted from up north, so you can catch all the races going on from governor down, Senate, all of those. And there's a chance we're trying to get an auditor debate as well. So stay tuned for that. All right, I think I got all those announcements in, so thank you. We're going to begin with a prayer by Kurt, and then also a pledge by Kurt. Two different Kurts tonight, so thank you.
Well, Father, we thank you for all the people that are here tonight that really want to learn about the truth and keep our country free. We have setbacks in the world, Lord, but we know that you're in charge. And we pray for all the candidates tonight that they would have wisdom and discernment, and that they would, Lord, tell the truth. That's what we want, the truth. And we thank you all for this. In Jesus' name we ask. Amen. Amen.
Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Okay, as far as our kind of format, what we're going to do is 3-minute opening statements. I brought more batteries because this always happens. 2 minutes for the question answers, and then if they're named and they need a rebuttal, it'll be a 1-minute rebuttal. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to invite the state school board candidates. We have Kristan, Norton, and Joann, Brinton, and Jordan Hess has agreed to be our moderator, so we thank you for that. Yes. Seems like I have to do that. Okay, so remember, if you have a question, feel free to wave that card and we'll pick it up for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you to our two candidates, two very fine women. Thank you so much for participating tonight. I have a couple of prepared questions, and then we will turn to the questions from the audience. First question. Sorry, you get 3-minute opening statements. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Kristan Norton, and I am a public school teacher here in Washington County. I teach 5th grade. I just finished my 28th year, so I am going into the big 29, which is, I think, my age. So I love 5th graders. They do keep you young. I've lived in I've lived in southern Utah my whole life, but I've lived in Washington County since the 60s. And my parents were both public educators as well, so I come from a very strong education background. I ran in 2020 as the candidate from this area, and my 4 years on the state school board have been very eye-opening. I thought I was going there to be talking about education, but this is the first time, our group was the first year that came in as political candidates with, partisan. And it's made a big difference. We talk about a lot of social issues. I would like to get back to more education issues. I think that those social issues belong in the home. I think those are the kinds of topics that parents and their children should talk about, because I feel like that's how family ties are bound, and that's part of a family culture, not a school culture. The platform that I have is I really believe that all children can learn, and especially we need to have a safe environment for all children, because that is the best thing to enhance their learning ability. I also believe that we need to make sure, and I have fought very, very hard to make sure that state resources are spread throughout the state of Utah. I love the Wasatch Front, but I also love the southeast corner. I love the northeast. I really love the southwest part of our state. And you know what? All of our kids are special, and they all deserve the best education that the state of Utah can provide for them. I also really feel like it's important that we do all we can to retain our teachers. We need to bring in great teachers, but we also need to do more to retain the great teachers that we have. Thank you.
Hi, well, I am Joann Brinton, and I am a first-time candidate, did not see myself running for office. This has been a whirlwind and an incredible education in the last 6 months. I will just say I was kind of recruited to do this by people studying the board, and I had not studied the board much, but for the last 6 months I've been diving in. I have a history teaching background. I taught 15 years ago, was my last year of teaching, and then I got remarried and had a second family. But I have some experience teaching in elementary school and then in middle school, which is where my degree is. And I got to create U.S. history curriculum at a brand new charter school called American Leadership Academy in Spanish Fork. And it was such an amazing education for me. I grew to love our founding fathers as I created a curriculum for 8th graders to help them understand this nation. And I also got to teach a leadership class and use the 5,000-year leap in that curriculum and Covey's leadership for teens. I feel like I grew up with them. Middle school is where I'm supposed to be, and high school. My last year I got to teach at Highland High School, and I taught government and geography. And I was kind of biased a little towards charter schools because that's where I taught for 5 years, but that last year at Highland High School in Salt Lake was such a stretch for me, and I saw such amazing teachers pushing their students, and it was a great opportunity. I learned so much, and I had students at Highland. You know, in Spanish Fork, Utah, I had a pretty homogenous group of students that I was teaching. They all kind of believed the way I did. Religious families, strong families, and Highland High School was completely different. There were students from, I think, 38 or 40 different countries. We had refugees, different languages, loved it. So I love education, but I have felt so blessed to be, I got remarried and I had a second set of boys. So I have boys like 15 years apart, 32, 28, with a few grandkids, and then 12 and 14. And this last set of kids, I've been able to be home in the classrooms, volunteering, especially at the elementary levels. They're now going into 7th and 9th. But I saw it from the other side. I was able to be part of PTA in the classroom, helping with reading lessons, and I'm so grateful for Washington County. I think they do the best job that I saw. My boys' experience at Crimson View Elementary was amazing. I had such great teachers. I love the Give Me Liberty program that Kristan teaches. It's such a great program for 5th graders, and I'm so excited about United We Pledge and their new Give Me Liberty bus. And maybe it's not called that, but the education bus that's going to go around for these 5th graders. Anything we can do to teach full history and ignite our kids' excitement about our past and patriotism in our country, I'm all for that and academics. So I have jumped into this race to just be I want to be part of solutions and stand up for quality education and teaching children how to think, not what to think. Now.
Okay, first question, we're gonna dive right in. Got a couple questions that will be asked of both of you, and then one question that is specific to each of you. The UEA filed a lawsuit this week challenging the Utah Fits All Scholarship Program, a school choice program that was passed by a supermajority of the legislature and signed into law by our governor. Are you supportive of this program, and would you increase funding to this program so that more students can participate?
There are maybe three parts to that question, so I might need a refresher halfway through this. Yes, I read about the UEA filing that lawsuit, and that's quite a bold step. And it will be interesting to follow that and see how that goes. Utah Fits All provides options for our students, and I am all in favor of options. I think that we need to bust out all the walls in education. This is a big new world, and there are many different pathways that students can and should choose depending on their thoughts and their ideas. But I think that public school provides so many options. Before the new CTE high school in Washington County opened up, we were counting one day, and there was like 25 different options that students could choose just in the traditional schools. Now with the CTE school opening, is open, that's gotta be close to 50. And I think that public money should stay with public schools. We don't have a big abundance of money in education, and we try to be so careful, and Washington County especially. So I am worried to see this going up and up. The other thing that is a concern to me, and I am hoping that the legislature addresses this, but right now, if you've been in Salt Lake lately, there are billboards all over the valley saying, oh, get your child in swimming lessons, use your voucher money, get your child in, jiu-jitsu, use your voucher money. And I'm like, I don't think that's exactly what those vouchers were intended for. I can see a lot of ways to use them, but I don't know that's it.
Okay, yeah, I just saw that lawsuit was filed. That was concerning to me. I am all for parents having choice. I think there is not a one size fits all. Right. And we are a free market country and economy. And if the public school is not meeting the needs of children, parents should be able to send their kids elsewhere and take those dollars with them. And as I have studied the board, this is nothing personal, it's just about votes. I am running because of the votes. As I have studied the board, Kristan Norton's votes go with the Democrat attorney who filed this lawsuit, Carol Lear, and align with her votes most of the time. So when we say, and you can rebut, but when we look at like choice and a charter school, Cedar City is building a charter school right now. And I'll just give you this vote for an example. It was a unanimous vote by the city council, by the school board, the mayor. Everybody in Cedar City wanted this charter school to go in with through American Preparatory Academy. Senator Vickers personally called Kristan Norton, he said, and other school board members to advocate for this. Our parents want this, they want choice. The school board voted 13-2 to pass that and get this charter school going. She chose to vote with Carol Lear. No, why? Why not give parents choice? And there was also another investigation into American Preparatory Academy for their special ed funding. They do things differently in their schools, and they integrate their special ed students, and their rates are much higher for success for those students. And they got audited, and there was a big investigation, and there was a vote that came up to make them pay back millions of dollars for the audit when there was no evidence of wrongdoing found. And again, it was a 13-2 vote that they wanted them to pay this money back that would have shut their doors. They're the largest charter school network in the state, and their rates of success, their college entrance, is higher than our public schools. Free market, choice. I think we need to look at that and back up our legislature on conservative reform.
I had a private phone call with Senator Vickers, and that was not the discussion that we had. That's all I'm going to say about that. I also cannot talk about the lawsuit because that was done in executive session, but that was something that was very serious and includes federal statutes that education for special ed students require a licensed teacher to teach them. But the last thing I wanted to state on this was that I don't vote with Carol Lear. I vote with the people from District 15. Now, on our board, there are many people who they decide what their votes are by talking to the people in their district. They talk to the teachers, they talk to the parents, they talk to the administrators, and that's how they decide their vote. Well, in Utah, a lot of those schools, those teachers, those parents think the same way. So if we vote that way together, it's because we're supporting not our own ideology.
Thank you. Second question, and you will go first, Joann. What role should parents play when it comes to the education of our children? How much influence should a parent have in the classroom?
Well, I am a firm believer that the family is the foundation of society, and parents are the experts in their children's decisions and education. So we need to find ways to bring parents into the classroom, collaborating with teachers in positive ways. I think often teachers feel overburdened by parents just coming in to complain and wanting to pass their students through if they're not doing their work. So we need better collaboration for the teachers and the parents, but I think when we make decisions, recognizing that what's best for parents is also best for students and teachers and work together, things will go better. And parents need to be more informed. I think one of the big concerns I've had studying the school boards, the curriculum that our students are learning, you know, much of the curriculum is protected by copyright and parents aren't allowed to see it. That's a concern to me. And they say, well, you can come down and look at it at the school. I think we should be able to have a way where it's password protected, just like Power School, but parents should be able to get online and view any curriculum that their children are learning. We've got too many political ideologies making their way into the schools, dividing students under the guise of diversity, maybe equity, inclusion, and they keep changing the words. So they say, well, we don't have DEI, but they did for a very long time, and the school board did not act on removing it for our schools until the legislature stepped in and made them. They continually have to do that. That's what I'm seeing with the school board, not responding to the parents, to the asking for help, asking to get divisive things out of schools, sexual, sensitive materials, I'll say. The school board acts when the legislature steps in, is what I'm seeing with those, and they pass bills. And it shouldn't be that way. The school board is a constitutional body that has full authority to pass policy and set the standards for our state on their own. But I see a lot of inaction.
Wow. Same question. What role should parents play when it comes to education of our children, and how much involvement should parents have in the classroom?
Thank you. Our state constitution says the parents have the primary role for the education of their children. I don't think that leaves any question about how much, what part of education that parents should have in their children's lives. It is critical. And sometimes I've said that it's kind of like a three-legged tripod, but it's really not even that. It is the parent and the child. The teacher is there as the support. I want my parents to know when I'm teaching their students that I am their biggest cheerleader. And if they think their child needs this, I think their child needs this. If they think their child should do this, I think their child should do this. Now, sometimes they ask for my opinion, and I'm glad to give it. I've taught hundreds and hundreds of fifth graders, so I've seen a wide variety. But the one thing I always tell them is that every single one of these children is different, and you, as their parent, have a God-given influence on what your child knows and what your child needs. And I am fully in support of that. And I have said that multiple times every single year that I've taught. I want to help, but I am a help. I provide curriculum. I provide in exciting and enhancing ways of making their education wonderful. But I can only do so much, and they have to want to come to school. And so that's what I try to do in my classroom, is make it to be a warm, inviting environment where children know that they have things that they've got to do and things that they want to do and things that they want to learn. But again, that is the parents' right. It's the parents' responsibility. And I am there to cheer them on and do my best at helping their child get the best academic education they can.
Thank you. Board Member Norton, this question is specific to you. What would you say has been your greatest achievement over the past 4 years on the school board?
I feel like my greatest achievement over the past 4 years on the board has been working with our legislators to bring critical funds to central and southern Utah. When I got on the board, there is a school in central Utah that was almost 100 years old. It was one of the top 3 most unsafe buildings in the state of Utah. It had asbestos and unreinforced masonry. When we started talking about safe schools, it was just almost impossible to make that school safe. There were so many entrances and exits. And we were able to talk to the legislature. We were able to provide a way for some of these rural schools that don't have a tax base, that don't have the ability to bond, to go in and to get some critical needs met. That's going to make a life change for those people in that county. Safe schools is a very, very important part of my job on the state school board. I am the voice of teachers in the classroom, and they look to me, and when I say, no, we have got to have safer schools, we are sitting in a fishbowl. We don't know when it's going to happen, but we know that it happens in small rural areas or great big urban areas. So fighting hard to get money brought to our schools and our districts for them to make our schools safer and a better place for students to attend, I think will be kind of my whole big favorite part.
Thank you. Joann, we just heard her greatest achievement. Name what you would hope to be your greatest achievement if you were elected.
First of all, I just want to go back to my last question and separate Ms. Norton as a teacher versus a board member. I have heard so many wonderful things from parents whose children she's taught. She is a beloved teacher, and I commend her for that. I am only running based on votes on the board. So I just want to separate that because she's a wonderful teacher and lady. So, but what I would like to achieve on this school board is bringing about conservative reform now that it's partisan. So the state school board has 15 board members. It used to be appointed and then it was nonpartisan. But 4 years ago, it was made partisan, as she said. So we now have 2 Democrats and 13 Republicans on our state school board. And we cannot get conservative pushback on any contested issues. A lot of the motions are unanimous. I'm concerned about transparency. It is so hard to find the votes. They're not in the minutes. When you go to the website and look up the votes, you see all these little tiny motions being made. Where are the big ones? And they say there's transparency because you can go to their YouTube channel and watch sometimes 12-hour long meetings. That's not transparency. I feel like there should be a clear agenda. There is a newsletter that goes out to education partners, not to parents who can't subscribe. There are a couple of board members, I think, creating, I know Joe Carey has a newsletter that he said 5,000 people subscribe to because parents want to know what's happening in the schools. So I would like to see more transparency on the school board and a school board that can get conservative pushback. There are things worth pushing back on in education. As it has swung so far progressive for so long, we're seeing the effects of that. We need to get back to restoring a focus on academics and rigor, like merit-based achievements. As we set standards and policies, I want to up the standards, not continually see them being lowered.
Yes.
Okay, that actually goes right into our first question from the audience. It was recently reported about such low reading, math, and science proficiency levels in the 11th grade in Utah. Only between 20 and 35% are proficient in reading, math, and science. How do we solve this problem in Utah?
I think it's a return to merit-based education and achievement and excellence. I feel like I'm seeing so much of equity woven through the educational materials and the curriculum. And I think some people mean well, equity means equal to them, but when you force equal outcomes, that is socialism, really. And if you don't have a possibility to fail, you also can't really achieve great things. And so I feel like it started back in No Child Left Behind in the Bush era, that we started to see this decline in our American education. And I think we need a restoration to go back to learning full history. We do have hard things in our history and in our past, but we also have great things. And I'm concerned when I have parents, even here in Washington County, say, my child came home sad that they're white because we stole the land from the Indians. Hearing stories like that, what are we giving our kids to aspire to? There's fear of climate change. When I go onto the NEA and the UEA websites, I'm really concerned about the activism that I see being pushed in our schools. And I think social emotional learning, I think there's a lot of really well-meaning people who look at phrases but don't see the bigger picture, and that we're not looking at results enough like we do in the business world. If you don't look at, I had a businessman say to me, he's an international businessman, and he said, when I hire somebody in my business, I hire them to do their job, not to try their best. Are our schools producing students who are ready for the workforce to be productive citizens and take care of families and be excited for the future? I think the focus we need to look at the results and redo some things. And I maybe have gone off now on where that question started, so I'm not sure.
I'm really grateful that this question came up because I get to address some very wrong misinformation that was put on the internet by a candidate who is also running for state school board, and it's spread around the state, even onto the media. Those are not Utah 11th graders that took that test. Those are, let me back up. Those are Utah 11th graders that took that particular test, but it was a very small group of Utah 11th graders. In Utah, for those of you who know, who've had an 11th or 12th grader lately, they take the ACT test in 11th grade. They don't take standardized testing. However, the special education students are put in a separate category, and those who are the lowest 1% with disabilities, learning disabilities, take an alternate test. So these were the students who were the very lowest students in the special ed category that took that test and scored in the 20 and 35%. Now let's talk about our 11th graders that were not taking that test. Our 11th graders, when we look at those students, those districts that had more than 50% of their students take the test, Utah ranked number one in the nation on the composite score on the ACT test. So our students, when we get compared on a similar test, apples to apples, we do extremely well. And I have got more than just that particular category. So our students are doing well, our 11th graders are doing well, and that was misinformation that was published.
Thank you. Board Member Norton, how will you handle federal agency rulemaking and guidance that interferes with state sovereignty?
Oh, please help us find a way to get that 10% of our budget back from the federal government. It is the bane of my existence. It is special education, it is school lunch, it is transportation, it is Title I, and the rules and the restrictions go on and on and on forever. However, special education students take a lot of money. That is such a challenging area to teach in, and there's a lot of special equipment that's like medical equipment. And you know how expensive medical equipment, well, special education equipment is just the same. Some of the special education students need 4 or 5 teachers. So that's a big amount of money, and the state gives us a portion of it, but we're dependent on the federal government to make up the rest. Same thing, we have to have buses for our students to get to school. You can imagine how much one of those buses costs. They're not cheap. And in central and in other rural parts of Utah, those kids are on the bus for hours. So there's a lot of miles put on those. Where are we gonna get the money? You know, when we find that pot of gold or that money tree, boom, first thing that needs to happen is to get the federal government out of Utah. But until then, we gotta find a way to pay for it.
Well, I agree, and I don't know as much of the details. I haven't been on finance, but everything we ask the government to do comes with strings, and that's the worst part of the federal money. I worry about, I had a mom call me today just so concerned. What can you do about the food on the school board? If the food is garbage, and she's thinking about sending her child to a charter school here because I guess they have a hydroponics garden and they actually cook their food like we used to. But that's the federal government with its strings. I would love to see us find a way to fund it, and that will take a lot of research, but it's worth looking into. I think Utah should lead out in taking care of our students, and so many of the things, the data privacy rights, pushing ideologies, pushing education that does not focus on academics. I really worry about the social emotional learning that is having teachers take on the role of a therapist more and step more and more into the family realm that they're not qualified to do. I hear teachers saying they feel overburdened. There's too much to do, but actually the way that their percentages are looked at through the portrait of a graduate program, I think the social emotional learning is easy to focus on and it's easier to measure than the academics. But we need to get back to giving kids things to be hopeful for, and I think the rates of our education proficiency since the NEA has gotten involved have continued to decline. I don't think we're preparing our children for the real world, and we're seeing Asia and other countries far out past us. America should look at the results and change course and do better for our schools. And so I would be working to look for ways to do that however we can.
Okay, we received numerous questions around this topic. I'm going to try and combine them. What is your position on critical race theory and diversity, equity, inclusion in the schools? And at what point, if local districts are not preventing these, does the state school board step in? Joann.
Well, the state school board sets the policy and the standards, but the local school boards are freer. They're supposed to be freer to run things the way they see fit, so that Washington County doesn't have to, run its county and school district the same way that Park City does or Salt Lake. And I do think our county does lead out and protect our students better from these kinds of things. What has been frustrating to me watching the voting on the board, and I said it before, is that with issues like critical race theory and DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion, there is still, 2021 was a year where everybody thought these things sounded so good. We're looking at the buzzwords and the lines and well-meaning people. I mean, we all want to be included. We want all children from diverse backgrounds, wherever, and in work, wherever, to feel like they have a place. But I think the methods that these programs use have been divisive and done more damage to spread racism and groups and social racial activism, fear over climate change and teaching. I just had somebody give me a child's book today about A is for activism, and all the buzzwords were social justice warrior words for the students, and hope, I appreciate our past superintendent, Larry Bergeson, really taking a lead more than I think others did in the state and standing up here. But I would love to see, I feel like local school districts are more apt to be sued. They don't have the dollars when you've got big national companies coming in saying, you're gonna do this and you're gonna have these programs. They say that critical race theory has been taken care of now, but it's taken like 3 votes, and it took the legislature stepping in to get rid of it because the school board did not on their own. They still have a DEI, I don't know what it's called, but if you look on their website, there's still like a signed thing by the school board in 2021 where they affirmed their DEI statement on the website, on the USBE. So I'm concerned about these things. We need to look at bigger pictures. Who's pushing the agendas? What are the results? And if it's not uniting, let's get rid of it.
I'm so glad that this question was asked. I am so prepared. First of all, to answer the question of the second part of that question, if it is not being taken care of, this is what the rule says. Hang on, I went to the original. An LEA shall submit an annual assurance to the board that the LEA's professional learning is consistent with this rule in section 53G 10206. An individual may bring a violation of this section to the board in accordance with the process described in Rule 277123. If the board identifies a reported violation of this section, the state board shall provide an update to the Education Interim Committee as described in section 53G 2103. So yes, it's built in there. The other reason I wanted to bring this here tonight and to talk about it is because I have been plastered all over social media that I support CRT and DEI. In the original bill, first of all, our board came out with a proclamation on January 5th when I first took office that said, we do not support those things in classrooms that elevate one above the other. And went through all the things. We did not use the word CRT because at that time, there was the 1619 project. There were Black studies. There were all kinds of other things that we needed to have something, a canopy that was big enough to cover the whole thing. Our board passed that unanimously. We do not want that in our school. Then later on, Representative Jimenez came in with some adjusted language to it. And right after that, we were in the process of adding that, Representative Hall came in with the DEI language. At the time, what we did is we brought it all together, made a new rule, passed it 11-4, and it does not allow CRT or DEI in our school. I have voted against those both times.
Thank you. So we have a final question, and then you each will have 2-minute closing statements. We've seen a lot of endorsements from both of you all over social media and in emails. Of all of your endorsements, which endorsement are you most proud of?
The endorsement that I am most proud of is not yet posted on my website. It will be, but that's from my sister. My sister is Natalie Larson, a current city council person here in St. George, who has been by my side, I guess from the time I was 3 when she joined us, and has been my biggest supporter, my biggest cheerleader, and my best friend. And so that will be my very most important endorsement.
You know, that's an interesting question because the endorsements do keep flying, and I have a really big one coming up that I'm excited about, a couple that just came in yesterday. But honestly, I'm honored and humbled by the people that recruited me to do this: Commissioner Snow, Alexis Entz, Representatives Elison and Walter, who are on the Education Committee, Burgess Owens, because he sits on a national education committee. They are concerned and they recognize that education's headed in the wrong direction, and we need conservative pushback. We need people willing to stand up for our students and families. But ultimately, this was a matter of prayer for me. This is a spiritual thing. I don't know where you stand on that, but when I prayed about being recruited to run for this big, scary office and thought, okay, I'm a former teacher, I'm a volunteer, I'm a community advocate, can I do this? That I had the strongest confirmation that I was supposed to be in this race. And I don't know if that means I win, and that's okay. I just know I'm supposed to be here, being educated, being part of it, and helping educate you all on this. And so to me, this is a spiritual thing for me, and that's my most important. As it's been hard, like campaigning's not natural to me, and trying to have it be a contest, or I don't want to bash anybody personally. This is just about votes. Like I said, so that would be my biggest, is knowing I'm supposed to do this and be in this race, come what may. So just in summation, I am so honored and humbled by the people that I've met on the campaign trail all through this. I started praying last year kind of to just know, why do I care so much? I drive my family crazy, probably have driven friends away because I talk about politics all the time. I talk about education, full history. I love it. My kids roll their eyes at me, but I just wanted to be part of conversations. And as I watched during COVID, the fear that was used to control us and to take away our liberties, I thought, I want to be involved. I want to know the people, especially locally. They're making decisions that affect our lives, and we shouldn't be run by fear. So I've gotten to do that. Getting involved in Republican Women was my first foray, and it's been such a great experience to know so many people who are just standing up for our rights and liberties and trying to make a difference. And even though I would just hope that we can learn how to get along and talk about our differences and quit bashing people, attack ideologies, not people, because we all see things differently. And that's what I love about our founding fathers and our history. They argued it out a lot, and they came to this amazing constitution that created our nation in freedom, and it changed the whole shape of the world by the freedom we have here. It's a history worth knowing about and teaching our children and holding on to. And I'm so sad today by President Trump's all the stuff happening with that. I'm trying not to focus on that. I just pray for our country. I've met so many people through the delegate and convention process that are praying for our country, praying for leaders, praying for our elections to be safe, and I'm inspired by that too. We have an amazing state. It's worth protecting and defending, and so I'm just humbled to be part of this process, and to have gotten to know so many candidates running all over in different offices that are trying to do the same thing and just stand in the arena and serve and make our state better. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. I am so grateful that you were here and that we've had this time to work together and talk together. There's two things that I want to talk about in my close. First of all, I'm reflecting back on my first year at Bloomington Elementary as a first-year teacher 29 years ago. And when I walked into that classroom, if you look about in this building, there's the wood that goes up around the top. And right below that in my school, there were these colored cards that were laminated, stapled all the way around the room. And there are words on them like life skills, respect, responsibility, tolerance, tenacity, persistence, etc. And I was told, I wasn't given any curriculum, I was told, these are life skills that we practice in Washington County, and you need to teach them this year. And so I did. And we started off one about every 3 weeks. And it was so wonderful to see the learning environment that brought into my classroom when we practiced respect, when we practiced kindness, when we practiced doing our best by getting our work turned in and having the grit to follow through. Social emotional learning does have some problems in many parts of the country, but not all social emotional learning is that way. And social emotional learning can be goals, and it can be interpersonal communications and many things. So think about that as life skills that you want our students to be practicing in school. The other thing I wanted to just touch on briefly is there's been a lot of talk about the convention candidates. Yes, I did get signatures, and convention is over and we've turned the page. I am running, and I am running in the primary election now for all of the voters. I want all of the voters to have a chance to vote now. We gave the chance to the delegates. They have made their choice, but now it's going to be for the rest of you that didn't get to be a delegate to have your chance to vote.
Thank you to both of our candidates, both amazing. I love that this was focused on policy and not person or personality. Thank you both for participating, and thank you, audience.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Jordan for moderating for us. We will invite the Attorney General candidates to come up. Thank you so much. These guys have traveled down from up north, so we really appreciate your time. We know you love Washington County, and you want our votes, so we're so glad you came down. Thank you. All right, well, we will just jump in. Karen, thank you for timing for us. Everybody's been good with time, and just in case, she'll wave at you. All right, so we're going to do the same format. We'll give you guys 3 minutes, opening statements, and then we'll take some questions for 2-minute answers. If we need to rebuttal, we'll do that as well. So let's just start with Frank, opening statement.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I love coming down here. Again, my name is Frank Mylar, running for State Attorney General. I have over 36 years of actually practicing law, every year of that. I'm a career attorney. I'm not using this job for any stepping stone to other position. I'm 62 years old. I've been married to my wife, Debbie, for over 36 years. We raised 5 adult children who have now already graduated through college and have 5 grandchildren. It's a perfect time for me to run because I don't have children in the home, and that's I've got some of that free time. But I do want to say that I had 3 daughters, and they were all in sports, and I am going to fight to protect women's sports and bathrooms without exception. It's high time we start looking at these girls and their rights, their privacy rights, religious freedom rights, and safety into terms of this. And we need to start turning the tables around, turn the narrative around. I've also been somebody that's fighting for rights on an ongoing basis. You can see some of my literature. I'm actually endorsed by Mike Ferris, who was the head of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and also Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the premier organization fighting for our rights. They actually are leading out in fighting the Title IX issues in this country and around, and even in the state and all around. And I will join them. I will bring them in to help fight because they are the best attorneys, and they will not cost the state a dime to help fight these issues. The state of Arkansas already filed a lawsuit. I don't know why we haven't yet, objecting to actually the Title IX because we knew it was coming several years ago. This is nothing new. And so if you really want somebody that's been fighting in the trenches, and this isn't theoretical, I fought to protect sidewalk counselors. How much time do we have? I didn't look at it.
You have a minute left.
Oh, great. Not keeping track of that today. I fought to protect the rights of sidewalk counselors in front of an abortion clinic who were criminally prosecuted in Salt Lake. And I went to trial, we won, I didn't charge them a dime. And I think that's a significant difference, is that I actually have criminal law experience, both in prosecution and in criminal defense. That's a third of what that office does. We need to have someone with those expertise. I've also been the only one that's fought cases up through the Utah Supreme Court, briefed at the U.S. Supreme Court, and also argued at the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. I have numerous precedent-setting cases, and most of those are in constitutional issues. And if you want somebody that's actually going to fight for your rights, you need to elect an attorney that's been already doing it, because that is my career. I have been fighting for people's rights day in and day out, and I'm certainly going to do that even more as your next Attorney General. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Terry, and I'm running for Attorney General. Thank you for being here. I'm so grateful that you are engaged in this process. I loved going through the caucus convention system because I got to hear from you what matters to you. We got to have personal engagement. In fact, I really appreciated this gentleman here. He sat next to my dad at the convention, and as we talked about, I was a little concerned about what was going to come out of his mouth. But it was a wonderful experience for my family. And one of the things that I've heard the most from you and from others is, Rachel, how are you going to restore trust in the Attorney General? And I'll tell you how. By focusing on the work, by being accountable, by being transparent. I have been an attorney for 20 years, practicing law. I spent the first 17 years of my career in litigation. I started a private practice, then I was at the Board of Education, and then spent 7 years at the Attorney General's office where I litigated some of the biggest, most significant cases in our state's history. Now I'm the director of a state agency where I oversee 35 employees and a legal team of 40 people, a $200 million budget, and we continue to work on the most significant matters in the state's history. And we're doing it well. I'm so proud of the work that we've been able to do in my state agency, and I'm proud of the work that I'm doing. I work on litigation, legislation, budgeting, management, and policy, and I do it in a way where we collaborate with the most important stakeholders with the Attorney General's office. And those are the educational institutions, the state institutions, and higher ed. These are our clients. You are the people we are working for. This work matters to me. Another question I get asked all the time is, why are you running? And let's go back to the transparency, accountability, and trust we need to establish with that office. I want that office to be an office you are proud of. You can see what we're doing. You know how you're being represented. And this is the way we do it. By making sure I will make sure that we have constituent services where you can talk to me and I get to talk to you so I know what's going on. I will make my calendar public. I will hold town halls so you know what I'm doing and you know how I'm doing it and you know why I'm doing it. I am passionate about this work. I've been doing it for a long time. I have a lot of trust and support inside the office and outside the office. I will prioritize the issues that are most important to you, which are federal overreach and education, energy, and public lands. I will focus on fighting the illegal immigration crisis by joining forces with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's working on these issues. I will focus on law enforcement, protect our children, as I've been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police and sheriffs and county attorneys across the state. And I will fight for our kids by fighting the social media harm that is happening in our state. These are the things that matter to me. What matters to you is what matters to me. I will fight for you all day, every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you to so many of you for being here. Thank you for our Board of Education candidates. It's hard running for office, and you kind of feel like you're putting your neck out there for everyone to just kind of take a whack at it. I've been an elected official before, and you just have to trust that you're doing the right thing. You're following your heart. You're serving. It's interesting today. This was referenced earlier during that discussion. As I was coming down here today, I got a call from KSL radio station in Salt Lake City. They wanted to talk about, what do you think? Trump, exactly. And so I've been the state party chair before. I've dealt with the media. I know how this works. And they were asking the kind of questions you would have expected them to ask. Well, 34-0, that's a bad verdict, right? What if he's in jail? That really hurts him, right? And the point that I wanted to make, and that I did make over and over, and of course the person who's interviewing me wasn't obviously going to go for it, but this is how you work with the media. Sometimes you answer the question that they didn't ask that they should have asked. And that is, we have an attorney general in the state of New York who literally campaigned on going after someone. I mean, do you think that's appropriate? I mean, literally said, if you vote for me, I'll go after that person that I don't like. She referred to the former president as a con man. She called him an illegitimate president. So today, when you see this verdict come down, separate and apart from the merits of whatever the jury was looking at, we actually have, and this is what I said on the radio, I said, we have it seemed more like a political exercise than a legal exercise, right? And that is one of the things that concerns me. As a country, our institutions that matter need to be preserved. Now, I am running for Attorney General because we have a serious problem. And the problem is that we have many mid-level bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. that are trampling on the rights that we have here in Utah. And we've seen this in every conceivable area. You see this in lands, you see this in energy, you see this, I mean, we just heard about it in education, right? I mean, Title IX, you've seen what President Biden did in Title IX. Did he have the authority to do that? No, but they did it anyway. Now, I'm happy that we have attorneys general who filed suit on that very issue. When I worked with Senator Mike Lee, this was one of the biggest concerns we had. In fact, we had a cabinet in our office, and on the top of this cabinet in DC, it was all the bills passed by Congress the previous year. And then inside the cabinet was all the new regulations. The number of laws was about 600 pages. The regulations, 60,000 pages. So if you want to know where and by the way, that's like an 11-foot stack. So picture two of me, right? I mean, and if you know Carson Jordan, that's like 1.5 Carson Jordansons, okay? But the reality is that's the problem that we have. The solution is there's someone in Utah who's empowered to affirm and defend our state's rights against a federal government that has gone far overboard and is in areas they have no business being. That's the Attorney General, and that is why I'm running. So thank you. It's good to be with you tonight.
All right, well, Derek kind of touched on it, but since it's on everyone's mind, we were going to ask you your thoughts on the Trump verdict today. So if you want to start again. Yeah, we'll start with Rachel this time. Go ahead.
Well, I haven't been able to dig into it. We've been meeting with lots of people in Washington County today, but I'll tell you this. It's obvious that across the country, we've seen the judicial system be used for political purposes. And it has completely undermined people's confidence in our system. And when we lose confidence in our judicial system, we lose confidence in our constitutional republic. And so as your Attorney General, I will fight to make sure there's equal justice for all. What that means is it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, what your power is, what your financial status is. The judicial system should treat everyone equally, because that is the only way that we are going to create the confidence that we need and the trust we need to make sure that we continue to have a free country. And that is what I will focus on inside the office and fighting outside of the office for these purposes.
Can I say ditto? Is that good enough? In fact, one of the interesting things, President Trump he's going to appeal, as he should. And his statement was, the real verdict is November 4th, right? And that's as it should be. So there were 34 counts against him. And my biggest concern is the undermining of our legal system. And these institutions, they are so critical. And one of the things that concerns me, as we see everything from protests involving the Israeli-Palestinian issue to on campuses, I mean, things like that, is they undermine confidence in the institutions that are so critical to who we are and what we need to do as a country. And so that is my goal. And also a lot of what we do as attorneys general is there are 28 Republican attorneys general in this country. And I promise you there are a lot, and I've met a lot of them myself. There are a number of them that honestly are working on issues like this. And one of the strengths that we can have as a state is not just going after these issues all by ourselves, but joining forces with other states, other attorneys general. Because it's one thing for us to file a suit on, say, Title IX saying it's overreach. It's another thing when Utah does it in conjunction with, say, 20 other Republican attorneys general. It makes a statement, and I think it makes a much bigger impact.
I'll just tell you flatly, it's outrageous, this decision, and I'll tell you several reasons why very quickly. One of the jury instructions was that they didn't have to be unanimous. That is unconstitutional. It's clearly unconstitutional by U.S. Supreme Court precedent. This is the kind of insanity we're living in nowadays. There has become a war declared on conservatives across this country. And I hate to say it, but Rabbi Daniel Lapin said it the best in his book, America's Real War in 1999. He said, we're quickly becoming two worldviews. God is and God is not. That is way more true today than it was in 1999. And we're seeing a disrespect for the rule of law, just like you saw a Colorado Supreme Court These are smart people, right? And they kicked Trump off the ballot. The US Supreme Court thankfully voted 9-0. I think this will go to the US Supreme Court finally, because they probably won't get justice in the state of New York. That's how messed up it is. We better make sure that Utah doesn't get anything like California, Oregon, Washington, or New York.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, what is your balance between avoiding undue risk while still defending and protecting the Constitution? So I think we're at different.
I start probably right.
Did you start?
No, he.
I started the first one.
Yes,
Okay.
you did.
Okay.
Keep us on track.
So the balance of undue risk in terms of litigation. So one of the things that the state attorney general does is you need to make sure there are limited resources. So one of the critical things that the attorney general needs to do is identify where do you allocate those limited resources. You can, I mean, I've talked about the fact that I would love to attack in terms of federal government so many of the areas where there's overreach. But ultimately, you have to identify where do you move the needle? Where is it that you can actually file a suit? Where can you do something where you can actually make an impact? Because there are limited resources. One of the things I've done as an elected official, I was a member of the House of Representatives. I served on appropriations committees. I served on the criminal justice committee as well. And in terms of allocating risk, this is something that we talked about all the time from a policy standpoint. It's important to work with legislators and to understand that every policy choice has attendant risks with it. And this is something that from a legal standpoint in my private practice, I've talked with clients about this many times. You sometimes can do something that makes sense, but it has a lot of risk, and then it's just the opposite. And so this is something that for me is an important decision, something that we did when I served in the legislature. And so one of the things that I will do is not just wait until laws are passed, not just wait until the governor signs something into law or it's challenged, because those are going to happen. I mean, we saw just yesterday, you talked about this lawsuit involving the UEA, right? I mean, I love the Utah Fits All program. I love where it's going. But ultimately, what you need to do is work with the legislature to identify areas of risk and say, is it worth it? As far as Utah Fits All, and the legislator who sponsored it has endorsed me in this race. And one of the reasons is because, you know, I've worked on these issues, but sometimes the risk is worth it. And for that kind of a major issue, it's absolutely worth it. I don't have time to talk about SB 57, which is the federalism bill they just passed. But again, it's the same risk analysis. And I'm glad that the legislature sort of landed where they did.
Yeah. What is your balance between avoiding undue risk while still defending and protecting the Constitution?
Well, let me tell you that there's a lot of things where there's a risk-benefit analysis, but then there's important moral issues where you have to take a stand, and you can't quantify that. I will bring that to the public, but I will also do something. The cost of fighting some of these very important cases like Title IX, fighting the feds, fighting immigration, I will bring in outsized resources that are the best attorneys in the country. Why? Because I've already worked with them. I've already worked with the Immigration Law Institute before. I've already worked with Alliance Defending Freedom, the American Center for Law and Justice. These are the groups that have the best expertise, and we will fight these till we win. There are some things that you need to fight because they are constitutional issues, and you cannot compromise. Now's the time to fight. If we don't fight now, we're going to lose those constitutional values.
I appreciate this question because this is my job all day, every day. Actually, my title is the state's risk manager, and it's something that I've been working on for 10 years. Every single case that I've worked on for the state for the last 10 years, we have to evaluate what the facts are and what's at stake for moving forward. And we evaluate that risk in every single case, because when the government is wrong, we need to say we're sorry and we need to make it right. And when we're right, we need to fight. But we have to be prepared for the fight, because sometimes fighting is not winning. And that is something I look at every single case, every day for the last 10 years, is how do we navigate this? How do we pick the battles that will benefit the state the most? And that means you have to look at who the client is, what happened, and what's going to be the broader impact on the state. I've had Title IX cases where we could have set precedent that was incredibly damaging to not only the state of Utah, but to the entire country, because I worked on, and there was one, we took it all the way through trial, and then again at the 10th Circuit, and we won. Because we knew, as we worked on that case, I was navigating a case, the first time aligned case that went to trial in over a decade. And we were setting not only precedent in the lawsuit, but policy. So as I think through it, I think through these in terms of what every case means for the state of Utah. And that's what I do with the Attorney General's office every day. And it matters to me as we evaluate those. How much money are we spending? Who's taking care of it? And when we talk about attorneys and bringing outside resources, sometimes we do need to bring in outside resources. But I will tell you what, the attorneys in that office are amazing. They work incredibly hard. They know their subject matters, from dealing with public lands issues to child protective services to education. And I will support them so that they can support you in the state of Utah in fighting for us.
Got everyone on that one, right? Okay. All right, the Attorney General's office is a large office. How are you going to retain good talent there, and how are you going to manage the team?
I actually got an MBA years ago, and I actually did an evaluation of the office. When I worked for 3 different attorney generals over 12 years, and actually did an evaluation of how to retain them. That MBA program also told me a lot about management. And one of the things that I've done in my own private law practice is some things that I'll start instituting there. I'll actually start going around and meeting with the attorneys. I want to meet with all the attorneys in the office at least once a year, just like Sam Walton. He used to go to every Walmart store once a year. It's called management by wandering around. That's part of it, making sure they know what they need. You know, how can you do your job better? Some people have asked, well, hey, I need an extra monitor. I got an extra monitor. Wanted to rise up desk, some people. You know, you try to meet their needs of what they need. That's called human resource management. That's part of what the AG actually is supposed to do. The other thing is we got 46% raises a couple of years ago. That's fantastic. They actually hired 2 of my associates, even though I'm the highest paid small firm in the state. They actually were still able to hire them away. And so I will tell you this, that I will fight to keep that. It needs to keep that pace, because that is very, very important. Let's be honest. Salaries matter, right? And so I will work with the legislature all the time. I will go down to the legislature and testify personally on this bill, on other bills that really matter. And so you need to actually advocate for that office. And sometimes there's just not enough advocating for the office. And so that's something that I'll actually do. When I say I'm going to bring in these other law firms, these public interest law firms, I'm not going to just say that another attorney isn't going to work with them. They're going to work with them. But I can guarantee you that there's nobody that's the Title IX expert about fighting to protect women's bathrooms and sports in the AG's office right now, because they haven't really done it. But I will have them work with these great attorneys. They will get the experience of working with some of the best in the country, pro-life attorneys, fighting the feds attorneys, and they will learn to be better. That is actually very exciting when you get to do that. And so I do want there to be excitement about doing a well-done job. Thank you.
I understand this question very well because I spent 7 years there. I left a very good law firm in Salt Lake City called Fabian Dancott. I went to the Attorney General's office to do civil rights litigation and made half. So why did I go there? Because the work there was meaningful. I knew it had an impact on more than that one entity. It had an impact on the entire state. People who work in the Attorney General's office, they're motivated by the work, but they also want to be compensated appropriately. When the study was done, at the time that I left, it was before the pay raise went up, the pay went up. It was paying significantly less than most cities and counties. One, the office has to keep pace with the market, which has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. But more importantly than that, the people who are there because they find meaning and purpose in their work. They have a lot of latitude to do good work, and they want to be supported by their Attorney General. They want someone who has lifted that heavy weight with them, which I have done. I've done sexual assault cases. They're hard, they're heavy. I've dealt with cases where a child died. Those cases are hard and they're heavy. I will lift that weight with them, and they will be proud to work with me because I'm going to stay out of trouble. There'll be no shenanigans, and we're going to do this work together because you work for people that you are proud of, because you want to be there and because you want to do the work. And please talk to someone you know in the Attorney General's office. Ask them what they think. Ask them who they would support. Someone who's been in the office, who knows the work, who's there, who's been advocating for them for a long time, and they will tell you yes. So please, ask them about it, find an attorney, ask them what matters to them, and I think that will tell you what you need to know for how you retain good talent. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate this question because what I've done the last several months is I've met with some of the largest and most well-known law firms in the state of Utah. And I've gone in there right into the belly of the beast, and in one of them there were 40 attorneys staring at me, and I said, tell me what you think about the Attorney General's office. And they let me have it. They let me know. But one of the interesting things, and I always said to them, by the way, what is it that makes a good Attorney General? And you know what they never said? They never said, well, there's got to have this experience doing this or this. They always said leadership and vision and direction. That's what we want. Now, the problem is a lot of those firms I have met with have actually poached from the Attorney General's office. And so one of the things that is critical is we need to keep pace with the market. Something a lot of people don't know is that not only are they losing attorneys from the AG's office to go to private sector firms, and in fact, I've met a number of these attorneys as I've gone around and done these meet and greets, they're losing them to the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office, which is paying more. That's entirely inappropriate. The Attorney General's office should be the most prestigious firm in the state, and it should be the highest paid public interest law firm in the state. I've talked with legislators about this. There's a reason I'm supported by the Speaker of the House and the Senate President and so many members of leadership, because they understand that I understand this process. The office doesn't fund itself. You have to advocate. You have to go there. You have to know these people. You have to know what the appropriations process looks like, and that's how the office gets funded, because the reality is you are competing against the private sector. And as Rachel said, and she's exactly right, these are great attorneys, and they're not necessarily there for the money. They're there because their heart's in the right place, they can make a difference, and they're doing a good thing, and they feel good about the job they're doing. But we have to compensate them in a way that makes it worthwhile for them to be there. And this office needs to be the highest paid public interest law firm in the state. If we're gonna lose attorneys, I don't wanna lose them to Symbio.
So go ahead with your question.
Make sure I forget if we all, so keep me on track. All right, this next question is, the state of Utah recently passed regulations limiting teen use of social media. Is this an overreach and a violation of the First Amendment? Why or why not? And what should Utah be doing?
Social media is harming our children. There's no question about it. The data supports it. There's no mystery in the decline in mental health amongst our teens as correlated to the increase of usage of social media. So what are we going to do about it? Well, when cigarettes were killing Americans, they were regulated. Drugs are killing Americans, they're regulated. Social media is killing Americans, we're not doing enough. And so there are difficult and complicated federal issues, constitutional issues, and I will address those. But what I won't stand by is saying there's nothing we can do, that we're going to continue to lose teens. We're going to continue to allow these social media companies to access our children and promote ideologies that are harming them, that are distracting our kids from their families, that are teaching them principles that are inconsistent with their family principles, and also that are allowing sexual predators to go after our kids. I prosecuted sexual misconduct, and in every single one of those cases involves social media. Every single one. So I will not stand by and allow our children to continue to be identified, to be preyed on, because social media companies say, what do? It's free speech. We're going to sell your data. We're going to allow creepers to find your children. We're going to allow this to happen. So I support the efforts that have been started to protect our children from the harms of social media. And one of the ways is they adjusted the statute so it allows you to sue the social media companies if your children are harmed. And that's just a start. And I will fight this all day, every day. My kids are 13. It is something that I'm passionate about, and I look forward to doing that as your Attorney General.
I don't know the order.
Yeah,
Do you want to go
you're
next?
good. Yeah, it's you.
Should I go? Is it okay? Thank you. This is something I know something a little bit about because a number of years ago, the governor said, we got a problem. Social media is an issue, and the companies that are the social media companies better come to the table and help us figure this out. So they could have hired anyone in the state of Utah. There are thousands of attorneys. One of the biggest, Meta, hired me and said, what do? I said, well, we sit down with the governor, we sit down with consumer protection, we sit down with the legislature, and we sit down with all the interested parties, including experts in constitutional law and also child psychology, and we figured this stuff out. And there's a reason that the two legislators who went after them the most ferociously, have endorsed me in this race, is because they know that I have the ability to navigate these issues. It was referenced that these are tricky constitutional issues. They are tricky because we have First Amendment issues, and if you don't do it right and you violate the First Amendment rights of certain individuals, then what you've done is pass a law that's going to get overturned at the court, and you've wasted time, you've wasted resources, and then think of all the kids who have the emotional, mental issues in the meantime. So my job was to make sure that we worked with the legislature, and I did. I worked with them tirelessly to figure out how do we create guardrails? And that's the way that we navigated the constitutional issues, these are cutting edge issues. This is nothing that we've ever dealt with before. So what we did is we figured out, okay, we can provide guardrails for parents. We can let them access their children's account. We can create curfews. We can prohibit social media companies from marketing to kids or collecting their data. Those are all ways that we were able to work through protecting kids, giving parents rights, and making sure that we don't violate the Constitution at the same time. I think we did a good job, and the fact that those who are most involved in this have endorsed me in this race, I think is a testament to the fact that as a state, we've done a lot of good, and believe me, there are other states now watching, because the problem's not over, right? We've got a lot more work to do, and we will do it.
I've litigated pornography issues, I've litigated abuse issues, I've litigated a lot of these kinds of sexual abuse issues and physical abuse issues. There is also, yes, there's a First Amendment balance. And I will say this, we as parents and grandparents need to be a lot more vigilant than we used to. Because that is where it starts, right? We've got to start it in the home. We got to make sure what our kids are watching and what they're being exposed to. Now, that being said, yes, there's limits. It's against the law to provide harmful materials to minors, both in schools, in the libraries, but also over the internet. And there's also people that are looking to be predators on the internet. We have to be vigilant at fighting these everywhere we can. And there is a balance in going and in protecting children. We have a right to do that. They don't have the full panoply of First Amendment rights that a free adult has. And we need to remember that they need to be protected for a reason, because they're children. And so we do need to step in. We need to make sure it doesn't overreach, but we also want to push back on the parents and say, parents, this is more important than ever that you know what your kids are doing on social media. Thank you.
You started that one, Rachel? Okay. So we'll start with Derek on this one. Switching topics. We know that Utah is a majority of federal land. So what can the Attorney General do to fight back and give us access to those public lands?
Thank you. If there's one issue that I worked on probably more than any other single issue when I was the state director and deputy chief of staff for Senator Mike Lee, it was federal lands. In fact, I recruited someone who was in the legislature, a guy named Representative Wilcox, to join me. And what we did is we went around the state working with county commissioners, because the reality is, as I mentioned, remember how I mentioned that cabinet with all the regulations in it? Those regulations are what are controlling Garfield County and Kane County and Wayne County and Washington County, right? I mean, I've met with your commissioners here, and I appreciate their support in this race, but the one thing they always want to talk about is building of roads, right? And what always stops us from that? It's always BLM, it's always EPA, it's always those kind of regulatory issues. So this is what I did with Senator Lee, and what the Attorney General can effectively do. Number one, my hope is that the Republicans control the White House this coming year, because we can do a lot if we have President Trump in the White House. Now, if we don't, then the job of the Attorney General is to file specific lawsuits pushing back on areas. I mean, for instance, just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, BLM issued a new regulation. It was a 178-page regulation called the Federal Lands Rule. and it elevated conservation to the level of all the other pre-existing uses. And what that means is they can now deny grazing rights, mineral extraction rights, off-road vehicle rights, any of those rights based on conservation. In other words, they're going to deny all of them. So they now have access in a way they never did. But they violate the law that was passed by Congress. So a good attorney general would file a suit challenging that. And we currently have 60 or more lawsuits dealing with federal lands, because this is one of the biggest issues as a state where we have 2/3 majority, I mean, 2/3 of our land is controlled by the federal government. And it's only going to get more, especially in this area. So this is exactly what I would do as Attorney General. Time.
I've actually represented ranchers, I've represented counties, I've also filed a brief in the US Supreme Court fighting federal encroachment in in Utah just over a month ago. So this isn't theoretical with me, and this is a passion with me, because I am sick and tired of us begging and groveling to the federal government to use our land, whether it be the fact that we're going to use it for ranchers, or whether we're going to have recreation opportunities, or whether we can have roads across areas just to link things up, or actually it's to maintain roads that are already there. And whether we can have law enforcement enforce the law on every 4 corner and square inch of their county. I'm not going to stop in this. I'm going to do a full court press. I'm not going to stop until a lot of this land is actually returned to Utah land. That's the only way we're going to get out from under. Every time there's a Democratic administration, they switch the pendulum. When we get a Republican, it's decent for a while. I'm going to tell you, we missed a golden opportunity in 2016. Why? We had President Trump and we had a Republican Congress, and we didn't go through that hole that was there. We're going to do it this time. If I'm elected and in 2024, we have a Republican in the White House, we have a Republican in Congress and the Senate, I'm going to say, yes, now we need to return vast majorities of this land to be called Utah land and no longer federal land. That is the only way we're going to win this battle. And I'm not going to give it up the entire time I am in office. Thank you.
The public lands issue is a top priority for me, and I'm so grateful for the elected officials from Washington, Kane, Duchesne, Garfield, and others who have supported me in this race and helped me understand and appreciate what a direct impact this specific issue has on not just their counties and their communities, but on all of us. And the way we win this fight, it's litigation, collaboration. First, the Attorney General needs to show up, understand the issue. This is what I hear from our commissioners all across the state, especially in our rural counties, is we haven't seen the Attorney General in a while. The Attorney General is not showing up for us. I will show up for them every single day because this is a top priority. Because I care about protecting our families. And protecting our families means protecting our lands. The public lands are tied to our economy in a way that we have not always appreciated. It's tied to our energy and our agriculture. And one story, there are families, especially in Garfield County, that if we don't fight to preserve the grazing rights, which we can only do through litigation, because the BLM and the federal government is not helping us, they will lose their livelihood. When they lose their livelihood, the businesses that support that agriculture, they disappear. When those businesses disappear, those towns, those schools, they disappear. And we lose our culture and heritage that we have fought for over 100 years as Utahns. We are a product of our lands, and we deserve to have access and decide how they're used. The recreational industry, the dirt recreation in our state is bigger than the skiing industry. The agriculture industry is huge. And underappreciated is what's happening in the Uinta Basin and carbon and others. The extraction industry and in Emory is a massive economic driver, massive. And we have to fight for it because that way, my kids, when they buy a house and they're purchasing electricity, those rates are lower. That way, Escalante and other towns are still there, preserving what matters to all of us. Thank you.
Already answered, so yeah.
Thank you. All right, hang it in there, okay? Can we do a few more?
Yeah.
All right, let's see. What is your position on deportation of illegal aliens from the state of Utah, your approach to immigration?
So we're at it.
Thanks.
Is my turn. First of all, we're a de facto sanctuary state. It's not legal, but it's de facto because people dump illegal aliens in our state by airlines and by buses at night. And we're not doing anything about it. I will meet with the legislature on June 26th, as soon as I get this nomination, and I'll propose legislation that'll make it a felony to bring anyone into the state of Utah. And I can tell you, I guarantee you one thing, no one's gonna risk losing their pilot's license by bringing here someone here anymore. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna round up the people they've already dumped here. And we're gonna send them back to New York, because that's where they belong. They're a sanctuary state, let them have them. Some people have asked me, hey, send them to Mexico. Wait a minute, most of these people aren't even Mexicans. You know, these are not the friendly border crossers we had 20 years ago that are just looking for work. These are terrorists, they're people from China, they're people from Russia, they're people from the Middle East, and a lot of them are not from Mexico, but when they are, they're cartel related, they're somehow controlled by the cartel. Sexual slavery is a component of it, drugs, of course. We've got to get a hold of this, because until we start saying, we're not gonna accept this, here's our laws, we're not gonna allow it, that's when we prevent us being called a de facto sanctuary state. Thanks.
The immigration crisis is an economic crisis and it's a humanitarian crisis for all of us. I've been talking to the sheriffs across the state, and they confirmed that yes, in fact, people are being sent to Utah. They're given bus tickets, they're given plane tickets, and they are here. And they are creating pressures on all of our social systems, on our schools, and there's an increase of crime, even for things that you wouldn't think of. Car accidents, because they never had to go through the training process to learn how to drive. And so it's having a direct impact. So what's my job as your Attorney General? It's legislation, it's enforcement, it's policy. The deportation process belongs to the federal government. But we as a state can and should do more. One, we need to support what our sheriffs are doing. We need to give them the resources to address criminal activity. We need to build relationships with the communities that are here so we can figure out how to stop them from coming, which means we also need to work with Texas. I'm grateful for the endorsement of Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, because if we've talked about this, I've committed to work with him, because no one in the country has done more to address the illegal immigration crisis than Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. And so I'm particularly grateful for that. But this can only be solved through litigation against the federal government and creating laws that give us the power to address these problems directly in the state of Utah.
Thank you. This is the traffic humanitarian crisis. And the reality is, when you think about the human element, we have 3.3 million people that came across the border illegally last year. How many people live in Utah? 3.3? I mean, think of roughly the state of Utah. And that's just last year. There were 159 people apprehended that were on the terror watch list last year, which means there are a lot of people that probably came through on the terror watch list that we didn't apprehend. Now, the real problem that we have here, obviously the federal government does the actual deportation, but as states, there are resources we can provide and we should provide to our elected officials. I'm grateful that Sheriff Brooksby, who I've talked about this issue at length, supports me. And one of the things we've talked about is how we address those very issues, because they're not simple. And what I find interesting is I'm a little old-fashioned, okay? This is probably no surprise coming from someone that spent many years working with Mike Lee, but I believe that the federal government should only do that which is in Article 1, Section 8. And if it's not there, they really shouldn't be doing it, right? And most of what they're doing nowadays is not in Article 1, Section 8. But the irony is, if there's one thing that they should be doing, it's addressing illegal immigration. And what's the one thing our federal government isn't doing? So, and that has resulted in the fact that we are, as a country, effectively a sanctuary country, are we not? So our job, and my job as Attorney General, is to work with our law enforcement to make sure they have the resources, because they are screaming for the resources. They know the problems, because they don't just know them conceptually. When people arrive in Utah and they're new and they're dropped off, who do you think is the first person that gets informed that they're here? It's those folks. They know who's here. I heard someone say Democrats. I know, you know what's interesting? There's a lot of truth to that. And what's funny is our governor actually specifically asked the Biden administration for locations of where people are being shipped. And the Biden administration's response was, we don't have time to respond to that question. It's happening. So what we need to do is address it and address it in a humanitarian but strong way. Thank you.
Rachel to start. If elected, would you ever refuse to defend a bill passed by the legislature, especially if questionably constitutional?
The mission of the Attorney General's office is to uphold and defend the state's laws. Your job is to elect people to pass laws. My job as your Attorney General will be to let them know that there are constitutional challenges to those laws, but it's not for me to decide if I will or won't defend those laws. I think attorneys general who do that are abdicating their responsibility because that's not my job. My job, as expressly stated in statute and everywhere else, is to uphold and defend the law, because otherwise I'm taking away your vote. I'm taking away your vote to elect people who are making the laws. And that's not my job. My job is to support you, to represent you, to defend you as your attorney general, not to be your politician general. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate this question. Interestingly, about 20 some odd years ago, we had an attorney general, Jan Graham, and she was a Democrat, and she actually did refuse to defend the law. We had a law dealing with abortion, and she said, I'm not going to defend it. And the governor said, yes, you're going to defend it. That's your job as the attorney general. And she said, no, I'm not going to. And there was this tug of war, and he ended up hiring counsel specifically to address this issue because she wouldn't. Now, the job of the attorney general is to uphold the law and to defend the law. So it doesn't matter if, for instance, I'm the attorney general and I don't like the Utah Fix All bill. I actually think it's great. I think it's a good idea. And I hope to see a strong, vigorous representation of the state. By the way, you can tell a lot about elected officials by who doesn't like them very much when they leave. The education union didn't like me very much, which to me meant I was probably doing a good job. But the reality is the attorney general doesn't pick and choose. So what you do as attorney general is you defend the law, but you work with the legislature to make sure that the laws they pass are not unconstitutional. Because if they're passing unconstitutional laws, they're wasting resources and they're wasting time. And the legislature, they don't want to waste time. They don't want to waste resources. They want to do what's right. And so the job, and I've worked, by the way, with the Attorney General's office when I was in the House of Representatives. When I was in the House, we had members of the AG that would come and we'd walk them through and we'd all discuss these legal issues and make sure that whatever it was that they were passing actually also passed constitutional muster. Because there was a social media bill a few years ago that was vetoed here in Utah because it had constitutional issues. And Arkansas passed the same bill and a federal judge overturned it, ended up wasting in Arkansas tons of time. So we don't want to do that here. And so the job of the AG is to represent the state agencies and specifically to represent the state when laws, even if you don't like them, and that's the point. People ask me all the time, if you don't like the law, are you going to defend it? Yes, I will defend it. Absolutely. Thank you.
Actually, I was in the AG's office when Jan Graham was doing this, and what she did is she claimed that we didn't have the expertise in the office, and so they hired a hugely expensive downtown Salt Lake law firm that also didn't have any expertise in defending abortion. And guess what? They probably don't even care about abortion, right? But what I would do is bring in Steve Aiden, some of the best people in the country that have actually litigated these things. So that's a big difference between me. I'm not going to just rely on expertise that's not in the office. I'll bring it in. But let me tell you this, I'm very passionate about this. I will get involved in testifying on the legislature regarding whether something's constitutional because I've already done it many times. Gail Ruzicka and Regal Forum call me all the time to say, Frank, this is a disaster, this bill. And once the Speaker of the House, this is in 2013, it was reported in the Tribune, I didn't know this until this campaign, I just researched it. And it said, this bill is being upheld because of the opinion of Frank Mylar saying that it violates the constitutional rights of parents. It literally says that. It was being upheld because I weighed in on it. I went to the committee and I testified against it. That is what needs to happen. And thank God that bill did not pass. It was terrible bill, a terrible bill. And it was greased to pass. So what I'm telling you is there's times where you do not defend a bill if it's patently unconstitutional. I'm sorry. That's irresponsible. Just like that jury instruction in New York where it says you can't agree to you don't have to have a unanimous verdict. That's patently unconstitutional, right? And I will get there, I'll be in the legislature's face saying, you better not pass this because this is unconstitutional and we will not defend a clearly unconstitutional law. Now, how many times is that going to happen? Hopefully not a lot. But if it does, I have the guts to stand up and say, no one owns me in this race. That's what's important. No politician owns me. No corporation owns me, no lobbyist group owns me. I will do what the Constitution says. It's my job to uphold the Constitution, not to defend it to the death, even when we're actually wrong, right? Because I'm supposed to defend both sides. The right thing is to do what's right.
All right, I think we have time for one more, and then we'll do closing statements. So this last one, let's see. I think we're starting with Frank this time. Okay. Do you support the death penalty? It's a two-part question. Do you support the death penalty, and what criminal justice reform would you like to see in Utah?
Actually, I was at the Taylor execution. This was back in 1996. I was the person from the 18th Attorney General's office who was there all night during that execution, because if there was any questions about a habeas corpus writ or any of that, they would ask me, not the Attorney General. It was a firing squad execution. And let me tell you something, I am for it. I'm for the death penalty when I believe what I call biblical grounds. That means that there was an intent to kill somebody. I am not for it when nobody intended to kill somebody whatsoever. That is clearly wrong. The system is such that there is years of appeals and they can hash out every piece of DNA they want before this ever goes to an execution. But I think it is respecting life to be for the death penalty when you take a life. That's actually what the Bible says. If you respect life, you take the life of somebody who took someone in cold blood, someone else's life in cold blood. That is what I will defend vigorously when I'm the Attorney General. Thank you.
Keep going down.
Okay, go ahead.
I do support the death penalty, and I have not always felt that way, but as I've worked with the attorneys who work on death penalty cases, they've helped me really understand the role of the death penalty in our criminal justice system. They've shared with me numerous stories where a case was being prosecuted, and the prosecutor took the death penalty off the case, and instead of being able to work through that case, a person who was obviously guilty, and they were going to tell the police where the body was. Once the death penalty was off the table, that person's like, let's roll the dice. Let's go to trial. And so it's an important part of our criminal justice system, and I support it, I'll defend it, I'll uphold it. But even with that, we have to look at how the death penalty is being used. Is it being used appropriately? And is the process fair, not only to the convicted, but I think even more importantly, to the victims? Because the years and years and years of appeals is so hard on those families. The numerous times they have to go and re-testify or relive that traumatic experience is not fair to the victims in those cases. There are a lot of criminal justice reforms that we need to do, and there have been a lot in the last 10 years. And we've actually removed consequences in many circumstances and said, well, let's see if they can reform, let's take this off the table. But that's not been helpful. You won't be surprised to hear that as we've decreased consequences, we've increased crime. Pretty simple, straightforward math. And this is even especially in our juvenile justice system. I've talked to those who work in this system, and they don't have the tools they need to help these kids reform if they don't want to, or if there's not support. So we've got to relook at everything we're doing, what we're hearing and what we're seeing. Thank heavens we have Sim Gill in Salt Lake County who's helped us see that many of these criminal justice reforms are not helpful, and I will reverse them.
I think we all keep an eye on this issue. There are, as you recall, just a couple of years ago, the legislature had a really serious debate about whether they should outlaw death penalty. Remember that? And what did they end up doing? Not outlawing the death penalty, right? I mean, that is the policy in Utah. Now, there are currently 2 people on death row here in Utah, and there are different warrants that have been issued. Now, the reality is there is also a cruel and inhumane component to this, and that is the fact that it takes forever. not just years and years and years. In some cases, it can go a decade or more. And so what we need to do is expedite that for two reasons. Number one, I think it makes sense for the individual who's being accused and who's sitting there waiting, and also for the victims, because it's the same thing. As Rachel mentioned, they continue to have this process come up and continues to just, I mean, the trauma. I mean, I've talked to people who have been victims of this kind of trauma, and honestly, you want to make it quick and you want to expedite it, but you want to do it in a way that's fair. And so again, from my standpoint as Attorney General, I will defend the law. And I think that there are a number of reforms that I think we can create here in Utah that can be more fair and that expedite the process. But fundamentally, I do agree with the policy.
Let's just keep going online. Rachel, closing statement.
Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being engaged. I'm so grateful to be a candidate for Attorney General. This is the work I want to do. This is the work that I've dedicated my career to, and I will keep doing it no matter how this race turns out. This is a job I'm asking you to hire me for. And it's based on 3 questions. How am I qualified? I'm someone who's been in the trenches doing this work for 10 years. I have the litigation, the legislative, the budgeting, the policy, the management experience to do it well. And in addition to being qualified, this is work I love to do. You work hardest when you're doing the things you care about the most. That's why I'm here. And the third is, what are my priorities? My priorities are protecting our public lands, fighting federal overreach in education and energy, protecting our children from the harms of the social media, from online predators, and fighting the immigration crisis. And I will work hard for you all day, every day. I'm ready to hit the ground running. I have the relationships, the skills, and the desire to do this job well. So when you get your ballots next week and it's ready to fill it out, I hope that you will fill in the bubble next to my name, Rachel Terry. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate the support of so many people who have come out and who are engaged and are part of this process. It is not easy running for office, and I appreciate my other contenders who have spent a lot of time as well traveling the state. One of the reasons that I believe I have support from so many places in this state, but I mean here I've got the support of Commissioner Iverson and Commissioner Snow and several of the representatives and people like Mike Lee. It's because I have a track record of doing the very thing that you would do as Attorney General. This is something that I've spent my career doing. And it's not just, hey, vote for me, and I promise I'll do X, Y, Z. I've actually done it. One of the things that is the most critical thing that I think we can do as a state is push back against federal overreach. In the next couple of weeks, the Supreme Court's term is going to end, and they're going to decide a case involving what's called Chevron deference. If you haven't heard of it, I promise you, you'll hear it in about 2 weeks if this case goes the way that Senator Lee and I really hope it does. And what it does is allow federal agencies to just run roughshod over the states. And my hope is that that gets reversed. And if that's the case, the next Attorney General will not sleep for the next 2 years. That is, if that person's doing it right. Because there are so many areas where we need to push back. And I'll tell you, one of the other reasons that I hope this case goes the way it does, and I think it will, it's because there's a lot of things that President Trump did that were phenomenal policies, especially regulation, and Biden has now spent the last 3 years undoing them. There's 3 things he can't undo: Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. Right? And that is a lifetime of it. He had 4 years to appoint 3 people. That is unheard of. As your next Attorney General, I will spend my time working on so many of those issues because we will have a Supreme Court that understands the 10th Amendment, that understands states' rights, and that understands that states are separate and independent sovereigns. They just need to act like it. Thank you. Again, I'm Derek Brown, and I appreciate you being here this evening. Thanks.
Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Again, I think the key thing is my slogan is actions speak louder than words. There's different kinds of leadership. My leadership has been shown by, one, taking a law firm, which is it's no small matter to have a very successful law firm. I don't advertise. It has been very successful. I got 5 kids through college, and I also took on a lot of cases without charging people. And that's where you need to see. They want somebody that has some battle experience. Would you follow a captain or an officer into combat who had never fired a round? Would you hire an auditor who's actually never done an audit? These are the things I have actually been doing the job of an attorney general by filing amicus briefs with the U.S. Supreme Court on the Hobby Lobby issue, defense of marriage, defense of counselors, to be able to speak their mind in sexual confusion cases. These are things that I've done day in and day out. Search the federal docket, search the U.S. Supreme Court docket. You will see a host of different cases that I have filed. And I also have the experience of actually managing attorneys inside the Attorney General's office, hiring and firing attorneys, and also hiring and firing attorneys in my private practice. And so that is a very important component. I've also supervised investigators, attorneys, paralegals, you name it. That's the kind of person we need to take control. But the key thing is, do you want an attorney that's going to be fighting for your rights day in and day out? Because if you do, you need to hire me because I've already been doing it. Actions do speak.